Good evening, everyone. It is my pleasure to welcome all of you to the Vargas Museum for the virtual opening of Cast But One Shadow Afro-Southeast Asian Affinities. The museum takes great pride in co-presenting exhibitions that invest in research, reach out to different places, and explore a range of perspectives in discussing what has become artifacts like the nation or orthodoxies like regionalism. This project pursues its points through the trope of the shadow, elusive but also cast, albeit solitarily and maybe also exceptionally. It brings together the two locations of Africa and Southeast Asia through the politics and poetics of affinities. This assembly is not an exercise in harmony or unity, or a mystification of synthesis or confluence. On the contrary, its provisional legibility or apparentness stems from difficulty and struggle with overlays, tangents, incongruencies, gaps, and all around ill-fittingness, even as it aspires to encounters and intersections. We realize soon enough that affinities or tricky family resemblances are contingencies like shadows, subject to sources of light and the quality of surfaces, or tend to follow, leave traces, and mimic actual bodies. This virtual opening is but one shadow too in the spectrum of affinities. For this important effort in the field of curating, the regional and the international, and no longer just regional and international curating, we thank the curators Kathleen Ditzig and Carlos Quijon Jr., the ASEAN Foundation, commissioner of the exhibition, and the artists and lenders for their generous collaboration. As in all Shadows cast, this exhibition is an iteration, playing out in Singapore previously and moving on to Busan subsequently. Here at Vargas, the project is in conversation with Philippine contemporary art, pieces from the collection of Filipino collectors, and the persona of Jorge Vargas, after which this institution is named. Virtual or actual, incremental or consolidated, this digital opening is the shadow of our time, and we cast it today. Thank you.
Hello. Welcome to the digital opening of Cast But One Shadow, Afro-Southeast Asian Affinities. I am Kathleen Ditzig, and with Carlos Quijon Jr., I co-curated this exhibition. Cast But One Shadow is the second exhibition of a long, iterative research project that situates Southeast Asia as a compelling coordinate to review the continued resonances of global solidarities. Developed in partnership with KONNECT ASEAN, an ASEAN Foundation arts program funded by the Republic of Korea, this 3-year project focuses on Afro-Southeast Asian affinities that emerge out of decolonization projects during the Cold War. It expands the current discourses that shape the history and legacy of Afro-Asian solidarity by proposing Southeast Asia as a discursive and historical framework. The first exhibition in this series, In Our Best Interests, Afro-Southeast Asian Affinities during a Cold War, also co-curated by me and Carlos, was presented in Singapore from January to March 2021 at Nanyang Technological University's School of Art, Design and Media, ADM Gallery. Spread out across 2 galleries, the exhibition took Singapore as a coordinate to explore Mafia-Lindo and Cold War projects of neo-colonialism. Cast But One Shadow expands this research and instead takes the Philippines as a starting coordinate to pursue the thematic threads of racial presence, anti-colonial struggle, and the interventive ways of navigating colonial and neo-colonial relations throughout Southeast Asia. The title of the exhibition is adapted from a 1962 novella authored by Han Suing, a Eurasian physician, novelist, and public intellectual with Chinese and Belgian heritage. The artworks in the exhibition are research projects that both unravel histories and speculatively project history into the future. Alongside the artworks, the exhibition converses with the library and art collection of the Vargas Museum, as well as a range of historical material. These materials focus on transnational cultural production, diplomatic gifts, as well as cinematic popular culture projects, wherein the jungles of the Philippines stood in for Vietnam and Latin America, and in doing so conflated neo-colonial imaginations of the Third World. From the color line to Mafilindo to contemporary retrospections upon Cold War solidarities, Cast But One Shadow takes heed of how race and racial presence informed arguments for sovereignty and expansive imaginations of the region during the Cold War, and how these imaginations endure and continue to color our contemporary world. The project represents one of the first initiatives by the ASEAN Foundation to examine an expanded and global history of Southeast Asian regionalism. The second iteration of the exhibition, and more generally the speculative mapping of Afro-Southeast Asian affinities as a field for study, would not be possible without the generous support of ASEAN Connect, in particular Ban Ham and Amy Darajati Utomo. The hard work and generosity of Vargas Museum and its staff has made this exhibition, but also the research, possible. We would like, Carlos and I would like to thank Patrick Flores and Leah in particular. It goes without being said also that the exhibition would have been impossible without the generosity of the artists involved, including Leslie Ann Cow, Farrell Dharma, Jean Claire D., Bonnie Heichel, Ariko Ikigara, Tuan Andrew Nguyen, and Sarah Stengel and Paula Naughton of James Cohen, Ilya Nervista, Amat Fat Osman, Sim Chin E, Simon Sun, Munria Mansor, Izola Tong, Ming Wong, and E. Ai Lan. In addition, we are so grateful to Luli Aurora Bernas for the loan of her grandfather's paintings, which you will see when you visit the exhibition either digitally in the near future when we've uploaded the documentation for the exhibition, or in person when the museum welcomes guests into the museum. It is such a privilege to open an exhibition and to engage with a public audience in a time like the one we're living in, where the region faces the continued effects of the pandemic. I am so grateful to Carlos for the late night discussions and expert mediation and coordination that underlies any effort undertaken transnationally in a post-COVID world. I know that Carlos and I are so grateful to all the builders, suppliers, and staff that have in the smallest of ways contributed to this exhibition, from holding a package for us to finding the right equipment. Thank you. And lastly, thank you for tuning in, joining us, and taking the time to reflect and think with us and the artists upon the complicated, entangled histories of the region that continue to define the geopolitics of our contemporary world.
Cast But One Shadow, Afro-Southeast Asian Affinities, is presented by the University of the Philippines, Jorge D. Vargas Museum, and Filipiniana Research Center in Manila. It is the second iteration of the Traveling Research and Exhibition project, started in Singapore within our best interests and developed with KONNECT ASEAN, a cultural program funded by the Republic of Korea. The iterative exhibition series nominates Afro-Southeast Asia as a field and framework that unsettles the fixations of geopolitical imaginaries of world order and pays sensitive attention to the potency of poetic and aspirational gestures of solidarity or affinity. As a field, Afro-Southeast Asia brings together two coordinates, Africa and Southeast Asia, that map out the trajectories of trans-regional solidarity that emerge out of the Cold War and their contemporary resonances, constituting itself as a porous and dynamic field of knowledge. As a framework, it allows for more grounded and responsive engagements of the history surrounding the relationship between these two geographic contexts to prosper, inflecting the questions we ask and the historical archives from which we articulate our interrogations. The Manila iteration extends the scope of and sharpens the stakes for the histories that have been mined in our best interests. It interrogates historical concerns that resonate with and radiate from the Philippine context of the Southeast Asian experience. Firstly, The current exhibition converses with the permanent collection of the UP Vargas Museum and its donor, Jorge D. Vargas. Secondly, selected artists from the Philippines, namely Leslie Ann Cao, Jean Claire D., and Isola Tong, have been commissioned to create works for the exhibition, proposing new entry points for Afro-Southeast Asian affinities. Thirdly, the Manila edition elaborates on trajectories of regional affinities that have shaped Southeast Asia. Here in particular, the discourse of Chinese ethno-racial presence and the place of the South China Sea in the emergence and development of discourses of regional affinities. Finally, it foregrounds and fleshes out the role of diplomacy in the crafting of trans-regional affinities. 2 case studies are explored in this iteration. First of these is the 2 trips to China that the Marcoses undertook in the 1970s. In 1974, First Lady Imelda Marcos, upon the invitation of Zhou Enlai, went to a 4-city 10-day excursion wherein Imelda befriended Chiang Ching, Mao Zedong's wife, and in the last days of the trip, secured an unplanned audience with the chairman. And in 1975, then President Ferdinand Marcos and the First Lady went to China to talk about opening the diplomatic relations between the Philippines and the People's Republic of China. The second case study is the place of Philippine President Diosdado Macapagal in the cultivation of an Afro-Southeast Asian consciousness in relation to his trip to Africa in 1963 and his relationship with Indonesian President Sukarno through the paintings that Macapagal received as diplomatic gifts from the latter. To place the discursive and historical commitments of Afro-Asia in conversation with Southeast Asia is to discern how the implications of histories assumed to be singular and unitary, such as coloniality or decoloniality, are rendered plural and prolific in this region. It is to acknowledge the modernity of the regional imagination and its discourses, and how its constitution has been informed by altered citations, shaped by empire, wars, trade, and the history of democracy and communism. The exhibition parses these histories and annotates how the geographic and geopolitical facets of the region refract and disperse these narratives across complex claims not only of agency and sovereignty, but also of neocolonial entanglements and geopoetic aspirations. In this sense, the title Cast But One Shadow is a provocation inasmuch as it is a political disposition that obtains in the context of Southeast Asia, particularly in how this regional category is understood and deployed in this exhibition. In more ways than one, the title embodies the complexity of these histories and alludes to an archipelagic condition, wherein political stakes, like shadows, ramify and resist unitary resolution. The archipelagic allows for prolific vantage points and vistas from which these histories are illuminated, casting, necessarily so, multiple shadows. Kathleen and I would like to thank the ASEAN Foundation through the KONNECT ASEAN program, especially Ben Ham and Amy Darajati Otomo, for their generous support. The UP Vargas Museum, particularly Dr. Patrick Flores, Lea Maridino, Gian Delgado, and the entire team for accommodating such an ambitious undertaking. The estate of President Diosdado Macapagal for trusting us in presenting the Sukarno gifted paintings to the public for the first time, and the artists, of course, for the compelling conversations that have shaped the exhibition. Responsive to the equally exceptional and by now everyday time of the pandemic, Cast But One Shadow opens in increments. Over the next weeks, we will virtually open a section of the exhibition accompanied by a series of curatorial annotations and artist presentations. While this is quite an unconventional way to program an exhibition, we believe that it is in this way that we can nimbly parse the intricate tangles and tendrils cast by these histories while sustaining the scale, scope, and ambition of of the sprawling artwork and research-driven exhibition. Thank you very much.